the music variety in BMS is simply not as good as the music variety in literally any other rhythm game where you're not constrained by the fact you need to key sound your music.
That's a pretty bold state. That's kind of bold. At least for a few people, it might be considered bold. But
No, I don't think there's any room for debate on this. To be quite honest with you, right?
Okay.
Because like, there's not much you need to say.
Please do go on. Like, yeah. Hi everyone. Welcome to the Corner Cab. This is our very first episode. I'm your host, Enemy, a music producer, also now apparently recent podcast starter, and yeah, this is gonna be our first pilot episode. But let my co-host introduce himself.
Yeah. So you may know me already. I'm Rennie the 16th. Call me Rennie. I like making videos about rhythm games and rhythm game artists, particularly. And we are joined today with a special guest.
Yes, one of our first interviews of the year. You may know him as a fantastic producer of, well, music, but that's everybody that's on this show.
Exactly.
You may have known him for a couple works in Dynamix, some fantastic works in I believe it's the Forum competition, as well, or no, the Forum compilation. Well as you've also seen him participate in numerous BMS of Fighters Ultimate contests, and also 2 final songs for OS World Finals tiebreakers. He is a master of unorthodox sounds. BilliumMoto, welcome to the show.
Thanks for joining us. Of course. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here for this pilot episode.
Yeah, so for the audiences that are finally like watching our humble little podcast, we actually started this a while ago because I had randomly on Twitter gone like, now what would a rhythm game doujin music podcast be like? And then it blew up, and I was like, okay, I guess we're doing a podcast.
And it blew up.
So I was like, sure, because honestly, I'm like, no one ever documents this stuff, or at least you can only find like YouTubers doing it. So I was, or like doing like videos like Rennie does, and Rennie's actually done some fantastic stuff with like rhythm game histories and artist profiles.
Appreciate it. That's why I had to jump on here.
Yeah, exactly, and that's why he was like, hey, I want to do this, and I was like, yeah, come on. I was like, come on, we can all work together. But yeah, so I'm actually really excited to have Bill on the show because I've now known Bill, I think, I want to say personally, not really personally. I've talked to Bill for a while as a friend for about like, God, when did we start talking? It was around before I took music super seriously, back when I was like a moderator in a Citus Discord server where we did like a song. It was a song contest. And you specifically were submitting something to it, and I was the person that you submitted stuff to. And so I found you, and so you submitted something, and then we just kept talking since then. But
I see.
It was but I was just really excited because honestly, I barely ever get to talk to you, honestly, because we're both so busy. But I'm
like rarely on Discord, but that's just how it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's interesting because also you were, at least from some of your early stuff in your YouTube channel, you specifically seem to do a little bit of 2DX. At least that's where it kind of looks like that's your like connection to the rhythm game community. At least one of your first connections to it. Is that true?
Actually, 2DX,
because also your YouTube channel has like not only your music videos and so on, but also like some 2DX plays.
Yeah, there's no 2DX. So I uploaded. So one of my first kind of forays into rhythm gaming music specifically was at some point I'd actually made a lot of friends in the Stepmania and Osumania communities, and that's how I actually started. So I started playing like Osumania and Stepmania back like a long time ago, right?
Okay.
And before that, I really didn't have much exposure to rhythm games at all. I did know like a little bit about the like photographic arts. I don't know how I found them, right? But I knew about them, and then that was like the extent of my knowledge of like the Japanese doujin community.
Okay.
I didn't know anything, right?
Yeah.
So I started playing Stepmania, started playing Osumania for a little bit, and made some good friends there. Online, of course,
And this was
not
kind of,
not you know.
yeah, and this was kind of before you were making music in generally, or
So at this point, I had started making music already.
oh, okay.
But like my only exposure to electronic music at this point was like Newgrounds techno.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
like
See, yeah.
really,
And
yeah.
and then I went from like Newgrounds techno to like Aphex Twin and like all the IDM artists that people talked about that are not in the rhythm game stuff, right?
Okay, cool.
Like the Flashbulb, Venetian snares, people like that. I love that stuff.
Yeah.
And then at some point during all of this, I was a massive weeb as well, so that helped.
Yeah.
That helped me get into Osumania and stuff. And then it was only after I've been playing Osumania for a long time that I actually discovered BMS and BOF and all of that. And there were some people. A few names that come to mind specifically is like Agka. He's still somehow quite active in the Osumania and BMS communities, at least the English-speaking BMS community.
Okay.
And like he's one of those guys that you don't really hear about until you dig deeper, and then you see his name everywhere. Right?
Yeah.
Like he's made so many BMS maps. He's made like some of the tools that a lot of us are using to create our BMS. Right?
Oh, wow.
Especially with like translating tools that Japanese developers have made, and then translating them to English and enhancing them to be more usable for a lot of people. Like he's done a lot of that stuff. At some point, Agka also created his own rhythm game like emulator, I guess, where you could open it was called Raindrop. It was a huge project. But you could open Stepmania files, Osumania files, BMS files, anything that was a VSRG, what he called a vertical scrolling rhythm game. Like the idea was to have a single program that would let you play all of them, right?
That's ambitious.
Which was very ambitious, and it never really, it never really got too big. But my God, like the heart was there, right? And for a while, because I couldn't actually get Lunatic Rave 2 to work properly on my computer, I just used Raindrop to test play all of my BMS files.
Oh, okay, cool.
I see.
All right, so you do actually have like a very extensive background in it, at least like to the point where it has like kind of shaped your early career a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. But the thing is, like, I never managed to play BMS anywhere near as much as I played Osumania or Stepmania. And the reason is because of, I would say there's like 3 reasons, I think. Yeah, I think there's 3 reasons. So reason number 1 is that, and the biggest reason I think is that BMS is key sounded, right?
Yeah. God,
and for a lot of people,
it's key sounded.
Yeah,
I'm experiencing that pain right now. Go on. Yeah.
For a lot of people, key sounding is a plus, right? It's great. It's a great feature. But for me, right, I grew up playing the piano, and I had grown into a play style playing the other rhythm games where I would try to time my key presses. Well, I would base all of my timing on the sound that my fingers made when they pressed my keyboard, right? Like there's a visible audible click when you click your keyboard. And there's like extremely low latency between the sound of your keyboard click and then, when it hits your ear, right?
Yeah, right.
But with BMS, that latency goes way up. It's like 60 or something milliseconds, right? And that I could never get used to that. And I tried so many things to try and lower that latency to make it playable, but they would all have drawbacks and they would all just kind of not work at the end of the day. So that's reason number 1. Reason number 2 is that the music variety in BMS is simply not as good as the music variety in literally any other rhythm game where you're not constrained by the fact you need to key sound your music, right?
Okay. That's a pretty bold state. That's kind of bold. At least for a few people, it might be considered bold, but.
No, I don't think there's any room for debate on this, to be quite honest with you. Right? Because like, there's not much you need to say.
Please do go on. Like,
it's like, look, if you like I told you, I grew up on like Aphex Twin, right? I grew up on Venetian snares. Are you going to be able to find a BMS of a Venetian snares track? It's impossible. You're never going to find it, right? If there is, it's a sabun, and it's like really not that popular. Probably like all the popular songs, they sound nothing like Venetian snares, for example, right? But you go to Osamania, you go to Stepmania, and there is a small but extremely dedicated community of mappers who love Venetian snares, and they will map all of his tracks, right?
Okay.
Who love all like the weird stuff that you don't normally find in the Dojin scene or the BMS scene. And like again, one of the reasons I started playing rhythm games in general was because I liked the variety of music that I was discovering.
Yes.
And
I think I can heavily relate to that.
Yeah. And like the reality was at the time when I tried it out, right? That BMS's kind of variety of music. Yeah, it's a different, like you'll never find BMS music anywhere else. That is true. But also, what if I just want to play, I don't know, some stupid pop music, right? Yeah. What if I want to play, Call Me Maybe, So that's like
I could never voluntarily. I could not. However, yeah, and that's interesting because it's like I relate to that same feeling that once you go down like this rabbit hole, like rhythm games are like this rabbit hole that once you get in there, you then realize you like, oh, it's like a small little hole, and then it's an abyss down here. Like it's so, but it's very interesting how that's a shared perspective, and that you and I come from like completely different sections, or at least have started in completely different sections of the rhythm game community. You have a very extensive background in like Osamania and Stepmania. And I started like with mobile rhythm games and then worked my way into the major, two completely different starting points. But it's like we arrived at like the same conclusion. It's so fascinating to me how interconnected it all goes.
Yeah, I kind of felt the same way, especially like because I'm also a Mania player as well. And I felt like as I got at a higher level to Mania, it felt like the songs kind of started to feel the same. Like, I don't know how to describe it, but it's like higher level Mania has to stick to a specific kind of genre for it to actually be hard,
Yeah,
that's what it kind of feels like.
And this is actually where, and I completely agree with that. Like, if you go to all the hard Osamania songs and all the hard Osamania maps, they're all like Camellia maps. They're all like speedcore, right?
Yeah.
They're all, sometimes breakcore.
I have like a whole that I'll save for like another type of episode, to be honest, because I have a whole opinion about like the Rise of Camellia is great. However, there's just some things I have like personally that I go like it is taking over the rhythm game community, but some people view it as a revolution, other people view it as a virus. Like it's different. Anyway, go on.
I mean, Camellia is the undisputed king of rhythm game music, right?
I think. Yeah. Okay. I get.
If you had to choose one person as the king, Camellia would be that person. That's all I'm saying.
It would probably be that person.
But this actually leads me to actually say, so in BMS, you hit that point where all the songs start to sound the same relatively early after you start playing BMS, right?
Yeah.
And of course, there are some like great standout tracks and some good stuff that come out of the BOF events every year that are truly unique, and that's great. Osamania, you go there, you get hit with all this rhythm, like anime music in there as well. You get like you were saying, some of the same Camellia stuff. And the weirdest thing is that actually the only people who I found can solve this problem have been the Stepmania community of all people. Right?
Which is very interesting.
Which is very interesting.
Is so true. That is because there's like usually I see dump streams. Is that what's called?
Yes.
Like a lot of dump shots on like the most random music you can think of, and it's so cool.
Yeah.
It's actually absurd. Like I discovered Ariana Grande playing those dump stream charts.
Wow.
I was like, wow, she's a great singer. What?
You guys are teaching me stuff because I don't do stuff. That Stepmania was not my community. Neither was OS. So wow. That's funny.
So I mean, like, call me basic or whatever, but like after you listen to too much, hardcore house music, you gotta at some point, like, even the most basic pop music sounds revolutionary, right?
Yeah.
So
I think
that's just kind of how it is.
I think the Dojin music scene and the rhythm game music scene in general is starting to veer towards. I mean, it's been on this trend of we heard a lot of Camellia, and then all of a sudden everybody wants to emulate that, which that's fine, but it's become such a saturated market where everything's got to be really above 180 BPM for everybody to love it and get excited. Which, again, is fine in moderation, but it's and even it's a habit that I'm trying to break too. I mean, I do stuff that's like really high BPM, but I also try to like not make it basic hardcore. I try to make it interesting with different types of sounds. But then even outside of that, what I'm also loving is we're switching gears actually a little bit. And I think this trend was kind of started by kind of artists can I think of that like I think this trend was really started by like sort of like Sobrum, Silent Room, that sort of thing. We're starting to see more of a jazz influence in rhythm games.
You're just thinking of random.
Well, it's not just random.
It's not really, just random. I know.
It's really like we're actually like even if you take a look at some of the early Vocaloid stuff and even some of the newer Vocaloid stuff, we're starting to get really jazzy and swingy. And even Camellia, and I think that also comes from Camelia's electro swing push.
Yes.
But
so that's an interesting idea to think about, right? It's because like to be honest, Camellia has been doing jazzy stuff for a very long time now too.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
And it's not like it just came out of nowhere. And Sobrum has been doing jazzy stuff his entire career.
Right.
And like plenty of other BMS artists have done very good jazzy pieces in both and other events and other rhythm games and all that. I think really what's happened is that like the last few winners of the BMS events or top rankers, there's been a lot of jazz, right? And that's what really started bringing things out.
Cite random from this recent competition.
Yes, exactly.
Which, so if any of the audience has not gone to go see random, go find Clue's BMS. I think it's BMS Manabo. Go find their Manabo page on all their pieces. Sense. The only things I can think of are Sense and Random right now. Sorry, but everything on that team is so good. Go check it out, please.
So the sorry. I was
just gonna... EP, isn't it?
Oh yes, we decided to release all 4 entries as an EP because it just made sense too.
Yeah. Did actually, just out of curiosity, just as a random off point, did Groundbreaking contact you at all to put them in?
Groundbreaking put in Sense and Random.
Okay, makes sense.
Yes, it feels like to me like the standard for Groundbreaking has gone up a lot in recent years.
Yeah,
but anyway, that's a different conversation.
Yeah, entirely. But speaking of just both, actually, I think I wanted to. We haven't even actually gotten into an actual topic yet. We mostly got into like the introduction of like you and the rhythm game community, but so yeah, you had been paying attention to BMS and you had been following both a little bit in the community, and then you actually decided to participate in it.
So that was a whole story, to be honest, right? What essentially happened was when Agka and Dolphin were experimenting with something called BMS-ON, which was supposed to be like a new BMS format, where so if you know anything about the regular BMS format, you basically have 1,200 and I think 96 slots for audio or for Keysounds, right? But you can't go over that. So if your music actually has a lot of unique sounds in it, then it becomes extraordinarily difficult to turn into a BMS, right?
Right.
And
makes sense.
And so like for example, so Sobrum and my collab, Submerg, we originally made it for like a typo entry, and it was not designed for BMS, right?
Right.
But at some point we decided to turn it into a BMS and submit it into both because why not? Because we could, right? And that was a nightmare to key sound. Absolute nightmare. Because like whenever you make a song for BMS, you're always thinking in the back of your head, okay, I need to like put some care into I need to make sure that for all the most, playable parts, all the most rhythmically heavy parts, I don't want to use too many samples. I don't want to create too many unique sounds,
Right, yeah.
But like you go to Submerg, and Submerg, like the whole thing is based on a piano track. It's the idea is it's a piano duet, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so we spent a lot of time programming all these piano parts, meticulously changing the durations of each note, changing the velocity of every single note to be unique. And so when I first tried to turn it into a BMS, I did some calculations using the tools that we had, and I discovered that just to turn the piano part into Keysounds, it would have taken 3,000 or something Keysounds.
Oh my god!
Which
okay.
is like triple the amount of available slots in a BMS, right? So that was a problem. So what we ended up doing was we just simplified. Okay, here's what we can possibly make interesting, playable, and then we separated that out so that half the amount of Keysounds we needed. And then we said, okay, we can actually get away with, maybe we don't need 2 different key sounds for 2 notes that are only 10 velocity in difference. But we ended up turning that threshold to like 30 or 40 velocity, which is why if you listen closely to the BMS version, like some of the notes just like clearly stick out because you cross that velocity threshold. Right?
Okay.
And so that was unfortunate, but it's a compromise you have to make. BMS ON tries to get around that limitation by essentially letting you save the stems directly as full audio files, right? Like 3 or 4. So it would be a lot like, if you're collaborating with someone and they say, oh, give me the stems, then you export all the drums in one audio file, you'd export all the bass in another audio file. And the idea for BMSON is that instead of turning all the audio files into key sounds, you would actually import these stems into the BMSON editor, and you would manually mark, I want this note to play for this stem starting at this point.
Yeah.
And which allows, you to basically make arbitrarily complex audio, but you can slice it in the BMS itself later with no limit on how many slices you can have.
That's nice. That is nice.
Which sounds nice on paper, right?
Okay, yeah. This is coming from a person who honestly does not do much to BMS, so like, please continue to prove me wrong. Go on.
Sure. So, I still think it's a great idea, but it ended up never catching on because it's not supported by Lunatic Rave 2. Oh, okay. That's the truth, right? Like everyone uses Lunatic Rave 2 to play BMS nowadays, and that's just how it is, right? And there are some other things like Beato Raja, which does support BMSON, which is great. But the other problem is that there's also no really good BMSON editor. Like Agka made one, right? But it was a proof of concept, really. It wasn't designed to be as good as, the current best BMS editors out there. So it never really caught on. But, when it was an experiment that was in its heyday, Agka came to me and said, hey, check this out. And I was like, wow, that looks cool, right? And so I actually tried making some BMSON stuff, and that's how I started. Basically, Agka approached me and said, hey, would you be interested in making BMS? I was like, that sounds interesting, right? So I made a few test BMSs, and I entered into something called Beat Music West, which was an event that Dolphin created. And that event was basically... So if you look at, like, this was back in 2016, I think, where if you looked at who was in the Western BMS community, or aka non-Japanese BMS community, it would have just been like this one server of people, right? Okay. And so that Discord server was like, hey, let's just make our own event because we can, and to show that we exist, because people in Japan didn't know that we existed. And so that's what we did. I made a BMSON for that, and that's how I started, basically.
Oh, okay.
And it wasn't until like 2 or 3 years after that I said, oh, maybe it could be fun to actually join the big BOF event.
Yeah. And that's where it starts. Then in which case, we should talk about, to start out, you have your own humble beginnings. We should talk about 2016 a little bit. One of the interesting things that I found when I was doing some research for this interview and looking through some of your pieces was was Chicken from BOFXVII 2016, and for some reason there's a piano at the very end. There's a piano actually at the very end that sounds like random, and that's why I made this connection. But the best part about this song, particularly, is not even just the full length of the song, it's the description on SoundCloud that it's sometimes you just want to throw stuff around, but it's not fun.
Oh my god. Okay, look, I was in the edgier phase of my life back then, okay?
It's just...
That's all I can say.
To be fair, actually, it's really interesting to look at your SoundCloud because you can actually take... If you go from, like, the bottom, where you first posted something, you can actually see a lot of the stuff where it's, like... You can see the parts where it's, like, you blow up, you have a bunch of views on it, and then you have the ones in the middle where you're kind of working, like... You're working out your sound a little bit, and you're moving up and up and up, and then eventually, boom, life flashes before Weeb eyes. And Weeb trap, huh?
Yeah, so that's what essentially happened is that some like around I'm on my SoundCloud right now. I'm trying to look at my private view of my tracks.
Yeah, while you look at that, it's like Chicken has this like entirely different sound, but the jump from that sound to life flashes before Weeb eyes is staggering. So it's just such a interesting development. Now, go on. Sorry.
So to be honest, I have no idea what happened. Right? I will tell you. I can look at my personal view of my SoundCloud, and I will tell you that 11 years ago is when I first posted my first SoundCloud track.
All right, because you probably have some privated audios too, right?
Oh yeah, they're and these were all like back when I was in high school, right? So I was just kind of dabbling in electronic music production back then, and I just posted whatever stuff I made that I thought was like at least halfway decent. I just posted on here. But this is like back when I also started playing Stepmania, so like I had no idea what doujin music was or anything, so I just shared these with like my friends, right?
Yeah.
In high school, and so like you don't hear any doujin music period at all until maybe let's see, until this thing called HRMRTOV, and this one's still public actually somehow.
Yeah, I'm scrolling through it again so I can find it.
And this was the first BMS I ever made, I think. And so that was like my experiment there, right? If you remember, I talked about B Music West. The two tracks here, Cuddle Piano and HRM, those were the two entries that I made for it. And then everything else, yeah,
I'm looking at the earliest we can find is like mandatory holiday stuff, which is
which was just some. I used to like they're all the tracks that I did this for, except for that one, are privated now, but. Back in the day, I would make something every Christmas for like a random Christmas remix, and it would be bad, but it was fun.
And even on your YouTube channel, actually, you recently participated in a music Secret Santa for
yes.
What was it? Sorry, I totally forgot the track name. This is too fast. That's not the track name.
Don't worry about it. So those are not actually Christmas themed, right? Those are just tracks. Yeah, those are just tracks. They're not, they're not actually. They don't actually sound like Christmas, so they don't count in my eyes.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Let's see, and then what happened from there? Yeah, I don't know. I just kept, having fun with music. I just everything is like everything here. None of it, I would say, is anything where I was like actually trying to take music seriously, up until maybe the Rabbit Hole album came out.
Yeah, and we're going to talk. That's on the list. We're going to talk about that.
Okay, sure.
But so I think a good amount of people in the rhythm game community probably knew you're from Weeb eyes, specifically from at least a lot of oldies in the rhythm game community played a lot of Dynamix, and that's where Weeb eyes came in. So. Yes. There was that, and then also, Weeb eyes is also not a typical track. It is actually a 3-minute track, which is much longer than most rhythm. I actually don't recall if you made a cut version for.
I did make a cut version for, I think, all the rhythm games that have it. I don't remember if Dynamix was cut, but I think a few of the other rhythm games that have it.
Wait, where were the other? I'm dumb. Apparently, where were the other places that this song was located?
I'm dumb too, and I don't know. I don't remember. I know a few games asked to have it in, and I was just like some random dude. Right? I was like, yeah, just I don't care. Just put it in there. You don't. But anyway,
Phigros.
Phigros, yes, Phigros
Yeah.
was one of the bigger ones as well.
That's
and like
yeah, and recently a Do-Fi.
That's true.
Recently a Do-Fi.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was. I don't know how the track came into existence, if I'm quite honest with you.
I was about to say, because you've already mentioned that you were a bit of a weeb too, so I was kind of like, it must have come from somewhere there. I would have loved to get the, if you could think of anything, I would love to get the story behind this, because it's life flashes before Weeb Eyes. So I'm like, why are we dying?
We're not. Well, it's what can I say, right? Okay, so one of the earliest kind of tricks that I discovered in my kind of experiments with electronic music production was slicing vocals and then being very like meticulous about pitching them using the FL Studio SliceX, and then turning it into like a repeatable loop, or I guess you could call it it's more like a riff, right? Like a vocal riff.
This almost moan, close to a moan vocal.
Yeah. Well, so I was experimenting with those, and those vocals all come from anime. Like you can clearly tell, right?
Right.
And like the first time I actually really experimented with this was in a really early track called Sometimes. And that's, I'm not going to talk about that track really, but
yeah,
basically like that trick, I really liked that trick. I really liked the sound that it's created, and it's still something that I do every now and then today, right? Maybe like hopefully with better execution than I did back then.
I would say so. I would say so. You've had better execution. Like if you think
better,
yeah, like as we start to get into your later works, it gets kind of crazy. So
yeah, well, if you say so.
Oh,
the
don't be humble, Bill.
It's like look, this. It's like every time I do it, it's like a lot of work, right? To put those chops together, and in the way that I specifically like to do it. And like I've experimented with other ways of doing it. Anyway, that's getting too technical. So you can hear that in live flashes, right? And to be quite honest, right, this was back when like future bass was becoming a big thing. I was like an avid follower of Snail's House at the time as well.
Oh yeah.
And
would you go?
Yes, their stuff is still great.
It's God, it's so good.
Anyway, yeah. So I was like, oh, I like the happy kind of ideas here, but also, this was also when I think Tennyson was becoming a thing. Like in the Western sphere of music, Tennyson made quite a splash for being a really cool jazzy oriented artist, but still like super future bassy sounding with really interesting sound designs and intricate, soft sound design. Because I was like, oh, I can basic like there are some ideas from Weeb Flashes Before Your Eyes, whatever, that that you can hear that are clearly like stolen from Tennyson, right? And basically the whole thing was just an experiment, and I never really thought about what the track meant or what kind of story it was telling. I was just experimenting. There's 3 drops basically in the thing, right? And I remember specifically that I just made 3 drops. I made a bridge between 2 of the drops, and then I was just like, oh shoot, this is turning into a track. Now I actually have to do something with it.
Yeah.
And basically like, yeah, the 3 drops and the one of the bridges I think are good. All the other parts of the song, like I listen back to it now, I'm like, meh, they're not good. But it's what it is. And then so that's how that track. And then like obviously, if you're just experimenting with stuff, you don't think of what to name your experiment, right?
Right.
You just do it.
You just kind of and it wasn't until like after I decided to release it, I was like, crap, what do I name this? And I mean, like I used anime vocals. So I'm like, well, there's anime vocals. It goes really fast, I guess. So
like flashes before your eyes. Okay, yeah.
There's some flashes, I guess, and it's the Weeb Eye. Like, yeah, so that's just
God. That actually is probably That's like the greatest naming. That's like the greatest process of naming the song I think I've heard in a little while.
All of the names that I have end up being something like that. Like I very rarely think of the name first and then come up with a song. Like that does not happen to me.
That honestly is like a common trend I've seen along some other artists. I am one person that like the name for the track actually comes really early to me, and I think it's different for a few people. But yeah, that's interesting. I wanted to bring that up because it's like I think for a lot of people, at least in the rhythm game scene, that was where they first saw you specifically, or at least a majority of the community that we're probably talking about. Like that's about where people found you. And even like some of the newer people that are getting into like rhythm games through like Phigros, that's also now where they'll probably find you for the first time.
Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know how the track, made the splash that it did, but it did. So, whatever. It's
fun. Now, I mean, like stepping away from the rhythm game community kind of a little bit, you then actually, the next kind of blow up after that really is, and even bigger so, was Lillie.
Yeah.
First of all, impeccable choice of best Pokemon character.
It really is just the best Pokemon character. So.
Duh. I mean, it's kind of obvious. This is such an interesting piece for you because it's so whimsical, I guess is the best way to put it. I think you say we all could like learn something from her. Now we're talking about Pokemon kinda. Why what specifically can people learn from Lillie?
I think first of all, people hate on Pokemon Sun and Moon a lot, and that I think is tragic.
I just hate Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon just because it's basically the same game. But I love Sun and Moon.
In terms of sequels, they could have done better with that. But like Sun and Moon itself, I legitimately think is one of the best Pokemon games that they've ever made.
That's interesting. The Black and White fans have something to say to you.
Oh, don't get me wrong. Like if you ask me to rank all the Pokemon games, Black and White is probably a close second.
Okay.
Right. I really don't understand why people like Platinum so much. I'm sorry.
Damn. All right, this interview's over. Get out. Like. Anyway, go on.
But like the thing about Sun and Moon and Black and White is that they really decided. I don't know who directed them, but they decided to really explore some ideas with those two, right? With those two generations. The Black and White being the ideas of what does it mean for truth and ideals? It's like the symbolism that comes out of it, sure, but there's also just like the plot for Black and White is just a lot more deep and dark than a lot of the other Pokemon games, right? And I really enjoy that. Yeah. The plot for Sun and Moon, like you could say, the world is not really ending as much as it is in the other games, so it's not as deep and dark, whatever. But I think there's some very interesting stuff there about familial relationships, about trauma, about and for Lillie specifically, right, about the desire to change yourself for the better. And
you can kind of hear that in the song, I think, a little bit too.
Yeah. Like I don't know, I just really like that, and I really like the theme that played whenever she was on the screen when I played the game. So I just all my best ideas happen when I'm in the shower. So at some point I was just taking a shower. I was thinking about the melody.
People getting good ideas in the showers. I can't do it. I literally can't do it. Oh,
don't you just get lost in the shower when you're just thinking? Like that's all you do. You just
the shower is the place for contemplative thoughts, and it's the time for existential crises too. Like that is where you sit in the shower and you go, I have a great idea, and then you get out of the shower and then you've lost all the juice after that. Like,
yeah, it's actually something you have to practice to like try and remember whatever you come up with in the shower long enough.
Practice.
I'm sorry.
What I usually do is I keep my phone like right by the sink, so if I have a good idea, I just write it down, like even though my hands are wet.
I guess so do I, but as like a music producer, like for good ideas, I don't have perfect or relative pitch. I mean, I know theory enough to like get by, but because I was a music student, but I don't have perfect or relative pitch, so if I have an idea, I can sing it, but then I get to the dot, and if I play too many wrong notes, the idea will get warped.
There's actually an interesting trick that I've done a few times where if you do come up with an idea and your imagination for your idea is vivid enough, you can actually get away with muting all of your audio as you put in the notes.
Whoa,
and so
really?
you don't actually like hear anything that you're putting down. You just see it, right? And so you don't actually care if there's any wrong notes or anything every day now and then. You just like put down all the important stuff that you have in your mind, dump it, and
so
then
you've used that trick before?
I've done it maybe once or twice. It's like I usually
is it anything that's out right now? Or is it just ideas?
They're definitely out. I just don't remember which tracks I did this for because you know. But
Man.
like,
it just would have been cool to like find that comparison with other tracks.
I mean, like I can tell you one thing for sure, right? Like Silent Room posted a sketch at some point, and I posted a sketch on Twitter. I forgot what he called it, but the sketch ended up getting a remix from Sobrim on his latest album, In My Heart, right?
Yes, and I know what you're talking. I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
yeah, that melody, that sketch, right? And when he first came up with that sketch, he posted it on Twitter, right, as a Twitter video, and his description for it was, I remember this very clearly. I got this idea, if in the shower. Again, in the shower, right?
Yeah, I know exactly the tweet you're talking about.
And exactly, right? And I don't doubt for a second that in his mind, he had actually created the entire 2-3 minute sketch in his head, right? Yeah. And so by the time he got to his DAW, all he had to do was just put down the notes that he already had in his head, right? He already composed everything.
Right.
So like that is a process that takes time, right? That is something you need to practice how to do. That's something that I had to practice how to do. And like and it's gone to the point where there's really two ways that I guess anyone can choose to approach music. Way number one is purely experimentally, where you just sit down in front of your DAW, no inspirational ideas or anything. You just start playing around with the knobs and stuff. And the second way is the way that Silent Room did it here, where he actually had composed the whole damn thing, and just all you had, and the DAW is really just the thing standing in the way between imagination and reality.
Wild,
right?
Yeah. And rounding that back to Lillie, is that kind of the? I mean, not this exact process, but that's kind of the idea. Is like when you saw Lillie, when you see her story in Pokemon Sun and Moon, you sort of took that feeling that you had and just kind of like the idea. I guess the full composition necessarily just there for you once.
I remember.
This is very abstract, so
I remember a few things about making Lillie. Right. Number one was that there was. I remember very clearly thinking, "Wow, there's a chord progression in this original soundtrack. You know, the actual Pokemon version of the soundtrack that the original Pokemon soundtrack. Basically, the Lillie there has the form is like 2 or 3 different chord progressions that basically repeat in different ways." But I liked one of the chord progressions a lot, and I liked the melody that played over it. I thought that was great. I think one of the great weaknesses for Pokemon soundtrack is that there's always like just the section in a lot of the tracks where you think, okay, they had like 2 great ideas here, and they're trying their best to connect the two. But you can tell that the connection between the 2 ideas is really its only purpose is as a connection. It itself is not a good idea. Right.
Yeah.
It itself, like you would not listen to this section of the song if you had to replay, specific parts of the song, right? So I was honestly a little bit pissed off about one of these chord progressions in the original soundtrack.
Wow.
Because it was that bridging chord progression, and I didn't like it that much, right? And so that's how it started. Actually, I was in the shower and I was thinking, well, what could I do how would I do this chord progression? How would I have bridged it? What would I do to change it, to reharmonize it maybe a bit?
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say that, I did a better job than the Pokemon guy did, but that like my reharmonization in my head ended up branching out into everything else. So that's how that happened.
Sorry, there's typing on my end. I'm trying to actually see who did Sun and Moon soundtrack. Now that I'm like, you've got me thinking about it. It might be Junichi Masuda, but I'm not entirely confident on that assumption.
It's high. that's the name that I've always associated with
Minako Adachi, who I think has done. Yeah, Minako Adachi is like relatively new, at least that I can see. That's based on my limited knowledge of like I haven't paid very close attention to the Pokemon music, but I just know that Goichi Nose is responsible for like Black and White and Gen 4 and Gen 5, which I love so much because of his jazz influence.
But, absolutely. Like Junichi and Go are like the OG Pokemon composers.
Yeah,
for me anyway.
Yeah, love them. But that was Lillie. So it's just really interesting because, in all honesty, I didn't really find out about Lillie until very late. And it's so like when I got to listen to this, I was like, oh, this is kind of a hidden gem. Like, this is a very interesting point. And this was like 4 years ago. So wow, it's been 4 years since Sun and Moon.
Yeah. I mean, it's and for some reason, people like Pokemon soundtracks, and people love remixes of Pokemon soundtracks, and so that's
insane in the ring.
And I have no. Yep. This is all I will say about that. Like one of my friends, Efinity.
We're gonna talk about Stell, by the way. I'm.
Oh sure. I'm excited to talk about he has some. Like if you think Lillie blew up, like go check out some of Infinity's Pokemon remixes. Those are bomb. Anyway,
I've seen some of those. Yeah, they're really good. Yeah,
they are pretty good. Super good. So, I think Lillie happens, and then I think we're gonna start to get into like, this is where for the rhythm game community it gets pretty big. About 3 years ago, there was a NULCTRL remix contest hosted by Silent Room.
Yes.
And you, my friend, were one of the winners, one of the big winners, actually. So tell us about the NULCTRL BilliumMoto remix.
Sure. So there's actually I'm just trying to refresh my memory exactly how this timeline went.
And I remember actually with this remix contest, like I was actually sitting in the library freshman year when this contest came out, and I had downloaded the stems, and this is before I got really good at music, or not. Wow, that was so presumptuous.
No, yes, it's fine. You're good.
Before I got serious about music. I remember downloading the stems and doing stuff. So like this is, in all honesty, when we're talking about this remix, this is super surreal for me because I remember this happening. It
was an interesting event for sure. I can this was an interesting one. And I don't want to take full credit for everything, but
right. Understandably, because
I think what really happened was I'll tell you my perspective, and I'll tell you what I think really happened. Right. What I did was after NULCTRL came out as part of the BOF event, and I was like, "Oh, this is a really cool track." Right. Yeah. For some reason, I felt a deep urge to try and remix it. So I literally DM'd Silent Room on Discord, and this is like probably one of our very first chats on Discord ever, right? Where I asked him, "Hey, can I have the stems for NULCTRL? I want to try remixing it." And he said yes, because at this point he'd heard a few of my tracks, and I guess he trusted me enough. And so I made the remix. I made the whole thing. I finished. I mastered. I sent it to Silent Room. He was like, "Oh, this is really cool." I'm actually thinking of making a NULCTRL remix contest.
So you did this ahead of time.
So I guess like enough people asked him for the stems to where he decided to turn it into a whole contest. But by the time he had announced the contest, the actual remix for my remix had been done for a long time.
Wow.
No, wait. This could bury you. Not really. Because Silent Room contest fixed? No, not really. But that's interesting though. Anyway, go on. Sorry.
So I mean, like I do believe that Silent Room did judge the entries fairly. Right. And I don't think my remix was the best remix that came out. I remember
I have a particular I have a particular affinity for I think it's the Meso Flip. The Meso Flip is really cool.
The Meso Flip is sick. There was one in particular, I don't remember, it was like a 3-syllable name. Their flip I thought was my favorite.
I'm trying to see if I think he made a playlist of them on on SoundCloud.
Yeah.
Trying to see if I can find it. Actually, wow, 2017 best, and actually you're on that playlist. That's with that's Life Flashes.
Kakeru.
Kakeru I remember Kakeru's was really good.
Yeah, there's NULCTRL.
That was so good too.
Was this right before Actually, this remix contest was right before NULCTRL EX, right? The extended version?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and it's let's see. There was the Factal, there was the Kakeru, there was the Quark remix.
I think Kakeru was the one that I liked. Yeah.
So there's the Mason. Yeah. So there were for the audience, there were 6 tracks that won. And by the way, this entire album is also on Silent Room's Bandcamp, so you can buy it if you want. Actually, it's completely free. Never mind. It was it was held in May, and these were the top 6. There was the NULCTRL Meso Flip. There was the NULCTRL Factal remix, NULCTRL Quark remix, NULCTRL Kakeru remix, NULCTRL Raphael, and then the NULCTRL BilliumMoto remix. Yes. So there were about 6 different remixes, all of them wild.
Insanity.
It is. NULCTRL is a very... Honestly, this is a remix contest where if you had to like rank like difficulties of remix contests, this one's might be kind of hard. Like,
yeah.
At least I can imagine it being.
I think like I can't speak for all the other remixers, right? But like I knew that going into it when I first asked him for the stems that like my goal wasn't to take NULCTRL and make another NULCTRL. My goal is to basically create an entirely new track using NULCTRL sounds and NULCTRL ideas, right? And so I think if you try to make a better NULCTRL, you're not going to do it. That's not possible, right? So you just have to do it completely differently. And I think all the remixers ended up doing that, or all the winning remixers ended. I think
you even said in the description of the SoundCloud, like even though the end product doesn't sound a lot like the original, this track was super fun to remix. So.
Oh that's true. I still stand by that.
Yeah, so it's just cool because I think also that's the magic in remixes is that everyone thinks it's like it doesn't have to be better than the original. It never should be. It never should be. Some people will probably go like, "Oh, this is better than the original," and I mean like that's subjective opinion, but it's more so like what can you do
take
to
a sound, you make your own.
Yeah, it's like it's like drawing a picture. Some people will draw a picture and then someone might be inspired by that picture and draw it in their style. It's like different anime characters drawn in different styles. Like it's how you express it, I think. And I think that's interesting.
Agreed.
Yeah, exactly. I think you hit on something that's like very fundamental to what I think everyone should be thinking about when they make music, which is essentially like the stuff that you make should be different enough from anything else out there to where people can say no one else can make this except this person. Right? And maybe it's like not objectively as good or as high in quality as some other stuff out there. But at the very least, no one can say like, oh, why would you listen to X person? Like that Y person is always going to be better than X.
Yes.
Right. You have to make it so that there's no such thing as that always. You know what I mean?
Right.
No.
I think it's
I hear it's like
Rennie, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So from what I see is like you take a lot of inspiration from like many different artists and you kind of merge it into your own like kind of style, and then you kind of develop from that and like eventually find your own thing, and you kind of go from there. From what I usually see, and I think that's the main thing you should do. Instead of trying to copy artists, you know.
Right. I think.
Well,
go. Yeah, Bill. Why don't you?
I would say copying other artists is really good for practice, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, I was about to add in that. I was like, you shouldn't be like straight up copy pasting or like completely copying drops and so on, even for your own projects. Like that's just for a practice standpoint, it kind of works, but like from an actual like if you're publishing music, it shouldn't be a thing. But like trying to copy other artists actually gives you a really good insight in terms of at least copying only in your personal projects, not posting it. But like it really helps you to understand why did they make these harmonic choices? Why did they make these melodic choices, I think. And I think Bill can elaborate further on that.
That's true.
We've this isn't about rhythm music anymore.
Yeah, we're kind of like, we're a little abstract. However, and we'll kind of get back on that because there's actually, we're getting closer to talking about the, some of the biggest stuff too. Shortly after, then I think we move on. You kind of ride this. After that NULCTRL remix, you get this real big surge, and now you're kind of on this wave. I think past this point, and then you release Rabbit Hole a little bit, and it's actually a pretty great, fantastic album. People should also go watch.
Thanks.
Everybody should go listen to this one too. I would ask about what the design. I actually kind of need to. Let's get this out of the way. Let me ask about the design. Like, what made you decide to go with this particular artist OC specifically?
Oh, okay.
Because it is present on Kara's. It is present on Kara's song jacket for Lanota with Nordigus Distantius, and then also it's present on your album, and now it's also present on your profile picture on Twitter and on SoundCloud. So, please.
Yeah. So at this point, I was thinking I should probably have at least some kind of symbol for myself, right? Because everyone talks about branding, like everyone has a symbol. Like Silent Boom has a symbol, Street has a symbol, Akira Complex has this really cool typeset logo.
Oh god, it's so cool.
Like
Yeah.
And like at this, you have to remember, like at this point in time, my SoundCloud banner, I think, was just completely like probably just a solid color or something really stupid, right? So I was like, this isn't gonna fly, I've made some money off of music at this point. I'd be stupid not to at least pay for a logo with it. So that's basically what I did. At this point, I had a few ideas for what I wanted the logo to be, and then I bounced them off of my my significant other, and we ended up going with the rabbit, basically.
And it really kind of worked out with the bow. I actually think that's a very nice touch.
Yeah, it's nice. It's like
she's cute. Yeah. She's super cute.
And it's super recognizable.
It is like now whenever I see this character, usually with that bow, it's like that's a very nice trademark of like, it's Billium. Like, it's super cool. And also, I totally it makes the one track. It makes me go on that one track from Rabbit Hole where it's just a smiley face.
Yeah, that one. I was just okay. So this whole album, you can think of it as my. Okay, so this whole album was created basically in the month between when I graduated from college and when I had to start working full time.
Got it.
Right.
Okay.
So it's basically like this is like the only time in my life I'll have a chance to make an album. So here it is. And then like I was just like kind of memeing around with it, right? I wasn't taking it too seriously. And I don't know, I just named the tracks based on how they make me feel, and that one made me feel happy. So yeah, that one's that.
Yeah, that works. Yeah. And from Rabbit Hole. Now we mentioned. Now we'll kind of move back into the rhythm game scene, and we'll kind of make these some rapid fire points because we actually have already reached an hour. I want to talk about one particular BOF track that I don't think anybody really like talks about, or at least I don't see enough people talking about. It's The Villager. This is honestly, and I haven't told you, this is honestly one of like my personal like favorites. I love everything you have done in this track, especially the BGA is so simple. Like it's not anything like Demayscape or Opti. It's not crazy BMS stuff. It's very simple piano view, but for The Villager, also, you made a distinction of changing between the types of hands that would be playing piano. One particular, and also, I think I should ask, with the bare piano hands, were the two band-aids intentional, or did you actually get hurt on one day? Like,
I actually injured myself cooking.
Okay, all right.
So I was like, well, I need to make the video. I can't wait for these to heal. So
at first I was like, does this mean something symbolically? Like, self-harm, something like that. That's what I was. I was like, it's kind of cool. It kind of matches actually, and I think also then the fingerless gloves. Is this the Villager or the Traveler?
So I will not answer that question, but I will instead answer a totally relevant kind of question. The whole idea of the track. I don't want to like say exactly what I had in mind when I was writing it, but there was a definite story that I had in mind, right?
Because you want to leave it up for interpretation.
I want to leave it up for interpretation, but like there was a definite clear story I had to the point where I actually wrote. So there's like a chippy like square melody in the whole thing, right? And it drives the whole second half of the piece. But that originally was actually a stand-in for a vocal, and I had lyrics written out for that vocal part.
Oh,
completely.
Wow.
And those lyrics would explain what the story was. But eventually, I decided that I could not. I was gonna sing it myself, but I decided my singing was horrible, and then. Or at least not suited for this track, right? Or no matter how much I could process it. And then I was like, well, I could try doing Vocaloid like I have in the past. But then I was just like, it just sounds better with the chiptune, so I just kept the chiptune.
Yeah, and for one particular small part of the Villager that you actually have like this little bit of freeform piano that goes, it's kind of like a bit faster. I can't explain it because I'm
are you talking about like in the middle section?
It's sort of in the middle section. It's really just kind of, it's super cool because it's got this quick piano, and it reminds me a little bit of Ferriquidus mixed with some of the later Sobrum works. I think yeah, but it's just, I think so much of the Villager is so beautifully orchestrated in a way that really does tell a full story. Chord harmony wise, I think it's fantastic. And am I also right in probably with that square lead and a few other things? Am I right that like this might be presumptuous of me, but like is it am I right in the fact that like maybe Silent Room was starting to influence you more at this point?
Maybe. See, I never. So okay, let me think. How would I have thought about this? So at this point, I haven't actually worked with Silent Room.
Like this is. I think I might have gotten this out of order, but yeah, go on.
Yeah. So yeah, I hadn't actually like collaborated with them at this point yet, and I'd always thought of like, to me at this point, like Silent Room was the guy that made No Control. Silent Room was the guy that made Nelv, right?
Yeah. Like
it was like the deep bassy neuro guy.
This is the super early part of Silent Room.
Yeah. I hadn't actually been exposed to the more chiptuney part of Silent Room yet at this point. I would say the chiptune's actually more at this point. When I made the Villager, it definitely came from Frums, actually.
Wow, and that's actually funny because Frums and Silent, that's interesting.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously the two are related, right?
Yeah.
But yeah. But so that's the answer to that.
But yeah, for everybody else, go watch the BGA for Villager. It's fantastic, and then also, it's just it's such a good song. I can't stop singing praise about it.
I'm glad you like it, because I think like a lot of people who were expecting rhythm game music didn't like it as much, but that's fine.
Yeah, well, I mean, I personally think it's one of those like BMS. I think both. I mean, both. Yeah, is a rhythm game contest at its heart, but it's like I love it whenever we find unorthodox stuff that's like not super out there, and we'll get to unorthodox stuff in just a second. But after Villager, I think a lot of composers then get really excited, I think, when we start talking about, I think everybody, all the artists that I think will probably be listening to this are going to be excited when we start talking about Tulip For Genji.
Oh god.
Now,
all right.
So there's so much that we could unpack here, but there's obviously not enough time. It's a 4-minute piece that not only you have inspired a crap ton of artists with, so much so that they made another Tulip For Genji. But to the fact where Silent Room is gushing over this song, like, in its early infancy. Like, when it came out. So, obviously from that, just the recognition, I mean, I know we keep rounding about back to Silent Room, but at this point in the rhythm game community, whatever Silent Room said was like, when he goes like, man, I like this track a lot, then everybody would flood to it. It's kind of the same with, like, Camellia, too. So obviously that in general kind of pushed Tulip For Genji into like this big spotlight. And then it actually didn't make form Which
it didn't. Yeah.
Which is, I think I remember Form got a little bit of shit for that, which
Well,
I felt bad for them because it was just the community like bullying them. But yeah, talk about Tulip For Genji. I mean, this is such a complex and interesting song that I just would love to hear your.
I don't know what to say about it, to be honest. Right, like everything you said is true. If I had to sum up Tulip For Genji in one word, right, it would be instinct. Where like similar to Lillie actually, where like all of my tracks end up being an experiment in some sort of way, where I'm like actively trying to think, okay, what do I need to do if I want to make myself a better producer? What do I need to do to practice? What do I need to? What's like a cool trick I could try out? You know. But for a Tulip For Genji and for Lillie for that matter, none of those. Maybe for Lillie more than Tulip For Genji, but Tulip For Genji was straight up like, okay, it's form, right? The idea of form is that you force a whole bunch of artists to just be hyper productive for 24 hours. And because it's super difficult to come up with a full track in only 24 hours, a lot of people end up collaborating, right?
Right. Which we see like a bunch of 4-way collaborators, and we're like, oh god, like
there's like 7-8 people collaborations on form. Some of like one of them, Skitter Smack, is like one of my favorite tracks, and it's like 8 people on it, right?
Yeah.
But like so I just again, you know, it was another shower thought, right? Where it was like the night before form, and I was just like, okay, what can I do in 16 hours? And I said 16 because I wasn't going to do an all-nighter, right? I was already working full-time. That's just not good.
Yeah,
right?
it's not plausible, right?
Yeah. And so, yeah, so I was okay, what can I do in 16 hours? And let's see, if we look before a little bit in the history, right? I had made Line of Gold. I had made a few other things. There are some, like I had saved all of my bass patches from recent tracks that were made before, like maybe a few months before, right? So I saved all those bass patches, and so I said, okay, well I can just like drag and drop those bass patches and try to arrange them in a way that makes sense for something that's like dubsteppy. That's cool. That's fine, right? That'll be easy. That'll take no time. So then the hard part was, okay, what melody do I do? What do you know? And I don't know where the 3/3 idea came from, or the 3/4 idea, or doing everything in triplets. I don't know where that came from. Yeah, all I know is that actually once form started, and I got into the DAW, and I had dragged a bunch of stuff in, I just set my snap to 3/4 for some reason. I don't know why, and then everything else just happened.
Yeah, that's kind of wild to me.
Yeah,
yeah, go on. Sorry.
I think like one thing to keep in mind is like at this point I had also recently made Sapphire, which is a track for that got released in an album for like Siritama's label. But in my head, right, the way that Tulip For Genji started was basically I started the track the same way I started the Sapphire track, and then I just dragged all the bass patches in. And again, instinct, right? I just did whatever I felt like doing for the next 16, 17 hours. And then at that point, I was like, I need to sleep. I exported it, I submitted it, and I went to sleep. Yeah. Right?
And I'm sorry, it's like, it's hard. I know it's like really hard to like figure out like these sorts of creative processes, especially when it's like, it just happened. Because it's really hard. I also find it like, it's really hard to really kind of explain. And I think that's the thing, Rini, when I was talking to you about like your specific, like when you made the Nanahira video, and then also when you made your Camellia history video, you didn't expect those to blow up like they did, and you don't really know what, like, even for me, like when I put out like when we did 42 Flux for last year's BOF with that was the BOF with Random and everything with Clue. When we did 42, I didn't expect as many people to really like 42. And I can't really explain. I mean, I can explain the thought process of like, here's why we did this, but from the creative standpoint, you don't really understand why you did it, or at least the ones that you did really well on. You also don't understand why people like it sometimes.
Yeah,
but there's
really never any logic to it. It's just how you feel at the time and what you feel like doing.
Yeah, and I think from a rhythm game standpoint, actually, when it comes to Tulip for Genji specifically, it's weird because I think you accidentally made a rhythm game song, because Tulip for Genji actually has some great parts in it where you go like, that could be fun to chart. That's fun to play. Like,
I think at some point it became instinctual to have like slightly interesting rhythms in all of my music, even if it's not intended for a rhythm game.
Yeah. And I think it fits like just really well. Anyway, but now since we're moving a little bit on borrowed time, we're gonna keep going. And now the note I have here on my notes for these questions is quite literally clue, and then in parentheses it's clue, and then in parentheses it's God just literally spill everything, because there's so much. So you made clue you made clue in this previous half.
I did not make clue.
Or you didn't make clue, sorry. You participated
we made clue. Yeah.
You all made clue. That's what I meant to say. You all made clue, and it was it's a massive kind of narrative. It is a bit of a narrative project.
Yes.
One that included the likes of not only big names such as Silent Room and Sobrum, who Sobrum had only, I feel like around now, kind of riding off of the success of Giselle, Widowmaker, and then we have Silent Room, who already is starting to get even bigger than before, and then we have an actual well-known name, Kurokote, actually, in here as an alias.
She was by far like the BMS heavyweight on our team. Right, a lot of things would not have happened if not for her, because at the end of the day, it is a BMS event, right? So, like everyone kind of
From what I hear, Kurokote was the one responsible for like the whole narrative around it as well.
Or, the narrative, the way I understand the narrative and how it came to be, was at the year before. Right, Sobrum Sayaka is how I never call her Kurokote for some reason. I always call her Sayaka.
I think I'd call her Sayaka too, but I barely have interacted with her as much now, so it's
Yeah, that's fair. So that's fair. So Sobrum, Kurokote, and myself were in a both team the year before, and for that team we made Pi over 26. Right.
Yeah.
And that was an interesting team, because it was really just like the three of us. We just wanted to screw around and have fun, right?
Yeah.
And that was fun. So the three of us had like known what it's like to work with each other, and it was a good time. And where was I going with that? At some point we decided to ask Silent Room to join the fray, but essentially, so for Sayaka's entry in Pi over 26 the year before, she had made a story for that with the character Liddell. Well, Lisela, I don't know how to pronounce it, but
I think Lisela. Whatever. Yeah.
So she made the character right back then, and then when we got Silent Room to join the team, we started discussing ideas, and then Sayaka just said, "Hey, I have this OC from last year that I really want to do more with," and I think the rest of us were just like, "Yes, please, can we use that?" and then at some point, I don't know if I came up with the idea of a story to begin with, but I do remember creating a Google Doc with numbered 1 through 4. And each one had like a paragraph describing that part of the story, right?
Being really cool. An unseen beauty, a gleam for sightless, a gleam for sightless. 2 is following the clue, the legendary random. Then 3 was the loss and discovery, self-dissociation. And then finally 4 is sense.
Yes. And honestly, those like subtitles and titles were just stuff that I just had to name it something, right? So I was okay, what's something stupid I can name it? But the name stuck, And so did the paragraphs, because we ended up sending those paragraphs to every single person that we asked to join the team, right? For BGA or for character design or whatnot. And I guess like everyone who read them was like, okay, there's a serious story here, and they were inspired by it, which always helps to create a better product. And it just kind of went from there. And I'm gonna be honest, my story sucked. I still think that the story I came up with sucks, but it was good enough and vivid enough to where people took it and turned it into their own, right? And that's all that we could have asked for.
And I think
that's all that I could have asked for.
Yeah, and I think with a lot of the videos, even from just not even from Gleam for the Sightless and then random self-dissociation and also Sense, I feel like also while there is a story there, and especially with the BGA, it's still I think you would still be able to ask like 5 different people who watched all 4 of them in depth. And I think all of them would give you a slightly different story, but it would be around the same type. So I feel like even though you're saying that like, well, the story I wrote sucks, I think the general concept of it, that in general is brilliant all the way through.
I do like the general concept. I mean, that's why we wrote the story to begin with, right? I think one thing that did matter when we were working on it is because like, what is clue, right? What exactly is the clue in the whole thing?
Oh man!
Please clue me in.
I will. Oh, and I had made it clear personally. I don't know if it was my idea or someone else's idea at first, but we made it clear to everyone within ourselves that everyone should decide what the clue was for themselves. And so like today, I still don't know what Sayaka's clue was. I can tell you what my clue was. I can tell you what I put into the 2 tracks that I worked on that I consider to be the motif for me.
You could, but you don't want to say it.
But yeah. So the answer to that is actually no one knows. So yeah, that's that.
So thus Clue is a tragedy. It is actually the story is actually a tragedy. I.e., we don't know what the clue was.
I think the story as we originally wrote it.
I'm sorry, that was meant to be a joke. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, but the clue itself ends in tragedy. Sorry, it's all you. It's just you.
Yeah.
The clue is you.
Whoa. It's the clue was the friends we made along the way.
Oh god.
Now, I think so. We've talked about like the beginning of your career, and then we've moved up here, and now we're getting all the way to, and this is the second to last thing, but now we get all the way to here, and now all of a sudden, here you are on Sense, working with Silent Room. Tell me what that was like, with Sense specifically.
With Sense specifically, okay.
And I mean, you don't have to talk about. We're not asking for you to talk about all about like what was it like working with him, like that sort of thing. Because in that case, then I'm gonna get him on an episode and we'll talk with him about like his point of view. I'm more so, how was working with Sense? Like, what was that creative process like? I think is the best way to put it.
Yes, I will tell it from my point of view. Silent Room has his own, right? So, what essentially happened was Silent Room. We talked a little bit about it, and he was like, "Yeah, it'd be cool if we could, do something similar to Tulip For Genji, because that was what everyone liked back then."
So he cited, Tulip.
He literally said, "Hey, we could try to do something like Tulip," and I said, "I don't want to do another Tulip, but we can do some parts of Tulip if you want."
I think you can kind of hear that in like the second. Sorry, it's been a little bit since I listened to Sense.
The second, yeah.
It's like the second track
going crazy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so my concession was basically, I don't really want to do another Tulip For Genji, but I'm happy to do another 3 out of 3, like a triplet song, and I'm happy to do it with you and see what ideas you come up with, right? And so, but I never actually said that out loud. What actually happened was I sent him a draft drop, right? It was like some silly melodic dubstep drop, and it was in full 4/4, and it sounded great, right? I think it sounded great. I don't know, and and so I sent the project over to Silent Room, Okay, so I made what I made was like some intro stuff, and then this drop in 4/4, right?
Yeah.
And I sent it over to Silent Room, and he does his compositional magic.
Right. Like
spamming spires everywhere. Oh my god, that man loves Spire. Right? And,
okay.
so you know that now. And he sends it back to me, and I'm listening to what he sends back to me, and I think there is no room in this for my original drop.
Yeah.
Like, there's just no way it'll fit.
That is exactly how I feel with a recent collaboration that I'm working with somebody. Like, someone like sent me a draft, and it was like this crazy drop, and I'm like, what do I do? Like, like, there's no room for me here. Like, you've already like, what could I add to the table? It feels like that.
I don't think it'll. So there's definitely that is like something to deal with whenever you have a collab, right?
Yeah.
In this case, it was more like Silent Room had added a bunch of ideas in, and a bunch of compositions in there. Like he wrote this at this point. He started the formation for like the first drop, the calming drop was there.
Yeah.
And I was listening to it, I was like, so the original drop that I made, there's just no way it fits into the rest of the song anymore. That was the issue, right?
I see.
It's and so, you know, we discussed it and we said, okay, let's scrap the original drop and just start over for the drop at least, right? And then obviously we work on each other's melodies and we, you know, change the chords here and there if we felt like we should have, and then after that, it was really just kind of smooth, right? Like nothing really interesting happened after that. It was just music making.
Yeah,
and,
I think it's kind of funny that I'm hearing essentially that this collaboration was essentially you going in, yeah, let's make something together, and then Silent Room comes up to you excitedly and goes like, can we do something like Tulip For Genji? And you're like, wait. Like, it's very interesting that he's chomping at the bit, especially with this, and I love how I think enthusiastic he was working with you. But moving aside from Silent Room, because this is not his episode, do you feel like for collaborations it really is like, it's kind of a, like, I know that typically with the pieces that you release, it's not necessarily, you don't do as many solo pieces as, at least as much anymore, due to not only just your daily life, I think, from being busy from full-time work, but you've done a lot of collaborations. Have you found that it's kind of, have you found that the collaboration process gets, have you found it gets like easier, I think, when the more you do it, or is it just kind of, yeah. This is a really, I totally fucked up that question.
No, I understand what you're trying to ask.
Yeah.
So the reason why I started collaborating so much is primarily because people started asking me for collaborations, right?
Would you say that was based off like Tulip, or?
It started. Did it start before? I think it started. Wow, I guess it must have. Well, it definitely started. I feel like it started before Tulip.
I think because it could have started like Afterlife, yeah.
It started before. I know it started before Tulip because I did a collab with Infinity actually way before. Pretty sure way before Tulip came out, and so that's what kind of started that. But like, I was just having so much fun, you know, like seeing what ideas other people were coming up with and trying to come up with ideas around the other ideas, right? And that was just so much fun, at least for a while. And also the commissions for collaborations, that didn't help either, right?
Yeah.
So I worked a lot on collaborations with that, and then like it wasn't just like, you know, that like random other people started asking for collabs. I know you asked for a collab at some point, and I was I was so deep in like making collabs. Like, there's no way I can possibly have, you know, time to make a collab. I'm sorry, right?
Yeah, I also was like the other person that I was like, I was feeding off other people's creativity at that point. I'm trying to make more solo stuff, but like outing me publicly.
I mean, no, it's not even that. It's just like literally like at this point, I'm like, okay, fine. I feel like only in the last month, I have finally been able to work on solo things again.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy to have been able to do that, right?
Which that must feel nice, actually.
It feels nice, right? But I do. Eventually, it's gonna, because like the thing about collaborating. Your original question was, does collaborating get easier the more you do it? Um, I think, I think collaborating gets easier the more you do it, but not just in the context of music, right? Because I'm pretty used to doing like group projects and stuff, and I understand that especially when creativity is involved, you don't want to stomp on the other person's turf, right? So that's like I feel like as long as you keep that in mind as you work on your thing and as your collab, then you're never gonna have any problems, right?
Right.
Besides like maybe the technical ones, maybe like your computer crashes when you try to open the project. Like that's always, I mean, that's always gonna happen. You can like the more you collab with someone, the easier that gets. I remember now, the first time I really collabed with someone was like with Zuna or ZXNX, and
Kara. Oh, what a
Zuna.
What a crazy track. Yeah.
Yeah, Kara. I don't know how to pronounce it, but
I think it's Kara. I'm not sure.
It's like the star, right? I don't know how to pronounce it.
It's the star constellation. It's
yeah. I always hear say Kara.
Yeah, okay, it's Kara then. But that was where I basically learned how to collab, right? Was working with Zuna, and going from there, I would say like the most important things to think about are, as a collaborator, you have to understand three things, right? Don't stomp on the other person's turf. That's number one. If you're gonna like edit their melodies, at least try to keep the essence of what they were trying to do. Try to understand the idea of what they were trying to do, and don't just replace it with your own ideas, right? Number two is you have to pass the project back and forth, right? You want to every time. So when it's your turn to work on the project, you want to do enough to where when you pass it back, the other person will think, "Wow, this is totally different than it sounded like when I gave it to them," and then they'll feel inspiration from that, right? They feel driven to like continue the momentum.
It really is like a dance.
It really is. And so if you can do that, right, like that's really important. But that's because like it's very possible to like spend all your time, mixing everything slightly better, or just like adding little pieces of FX layering here and there. But if the other person doesn't notice that like immediately when they first listen back on your pass, then they're not going to feel great about it, right? It's like you need to be constantly inspiring each other, essentially. And then the third thing is like you have to understand maybe your priorities are not the same, right? Like I know that, for example, Zuna, he's huge into super hardcore drops, like all like crazy things happening everywhere all at once type of
stuff, he's really inspired by Juggernaut drops like the Heaven and some other more like recent Bamani artists.
Exactly. And then and like obviously the more how would I say, the less experience that the artist has, the more that will kind of happen, where they'll focus on a few things and then some other things that you think are important they just won't even notice, right? But with Silent Room, I never got that sense. Like I felt like Silent Room cared about everything, which that was great. I can only say, he taught me a lot while I was working with him, so that was cool.
And that also, the final thing we can talk about a little bit is actually backpedaling a little bit into Purple Palace and what was it? 1-1. I think 1-1 was another one. These were not only Osu Taiko finals, but then also I think it's just Osumania World Finals.
Osumania.
Yes. Osumania.
Thank you. I couldn't place it off the top of my head, but Purple Palace specifically was used Silent Room and Seiyura was actually starting to gain a little momentum in the mobile rhythm gaming scene thanks to Igalta, and also then recently got into like a Lanota update. Like Seiyura is starting to like step in, so it's you with like two of these kind of, and also he had stuff in Sound Voltex too. So like
Seiyura's really I mean, honest, I had not heard of Seiyura until the collab, and then when I heard his pass, I was like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah, and you're like, "What?" So good? Yeah, like, and then so you're in this collab with Purple Palace, and I mean, surely for this, like, looking at these two names, I think you've now seen their backgrounds at this point. This has to have been a daunting project for you. Or at least made you feel a little conscious of, like, can I really provide anything to this particular... Did you get any sort of that feeling? Or did you feel confident in your skills going in?
I would say this actually goes back to the thing from earlier where if you're confident in what makes you different, then you don't need to worry about it, right? Yeah. So, like, I know that Silent Room is good at certain things, and after I found out I was working with Sarah, I listened to some of Sarah's stuff, and then I knew, okay, I know what I can add that the other two cannot add.
Yeah, right? I think actually I can see that. There's specific parts that I'm like, I know Seiyura specifically is strong at from a rhythm game standpoint too, especially making fast-paced music. They have a really good job of diversifying themselves. Silent Room has an amazing harmonic profile with also some I did some crazy Spire leads, which I imagine are probably a pain to mix now that you've mentioned Spire. And then
I think they were okay.
And then you specifically with I would assume, well, you insert here.
Right. So I will tell you what I consider my contributions to Purple Palace, right? Basically, how that ended up happening was Silent Room provided the first draft. Right. My primary ideas were, I remember now. I remember what happened. Okay. So Purple Palace was interesting because it was Osumania, right? And
this is a 7-minute track, mind you.
It's a long track, yeah.
Very long, yeah.
It's very long. Because it was Osumania, right? I was super excited for it.
Right.
Because I played a lot of Osumania. I know, what I want from an Osumania map, right? So I had all these ideas and all this stuff, and then, they asked Silent Room and Sarah to join. I actually had to try really hard to convince Silent Room to join. Originally, it was just going to be Sarah and I, but they mentioned at some point that they had asked Silent Room, but he said no, and I was like, wait, I bet I can convince him to join. So
I was thinking Silent Room was your responsibility a little bit. So that's kind of funny.
It not entirely true, but that is what happened.
Right. I digress.
And so, but like the key there is like Silent Room didn't want to work on it because it, to be honest, the deadline for it was very tight, right? And Silent Room knew that he was gonna be busy, and Sarah knew he was gonna be busy. I don't even know if it's a he or she. I'm just assuming,
I think it's a he because of.
I think it's a he too. Yeah. The two. So I was like, okay, this is going to be a nightmare if we don't organize it properly. If I don't
right,
Sarah's not going to be able to take the leadership on the whole composition because he only speaks Japanese. Well, to be fair, I only speak English too. But Sarah seems like a really busy person, right? He's also an incredible visual anime artist, which is just insane to me.
Yeah, it's kind of the same with like Yudachi. Like they just draw really good art, and you're like, what the fuck?
How did you get like this? Anyway, that aside, right? We did. I basically said, okay, I know Silent Room is busy, so I just said, okay, I literally created a schedule. It was like planning for sprints or something, right? Where it was like, this week I have the project. This week Sarah has the project. This week Silent Room has the project. This week we're going to pass it back here. And each week we should try to have 25%, 30%, 45%, 80% done of the draft. And then so I planned the whole thing out, right? So I basically planned out, okay, here's a schedule for how everything's going to happen. And then here are some ideas that I had because it's Osumania, I know Osumania, right? So I literally wrote down, I want to create a dense 200 BPM jump stream section. I want to create a triplet 16th note high dump stream section at the end, which will end up being like a 400 something BPM stream.
Yeah.
And then because that's because I'm like somewhat at least more familiar than Silent Room and Seiyura about what the top echelon of Osumania players are capable of, right? Yeah. So I said, okay, here's what we need to do in order to make something that would be interesting for them to play, right? And so we kind of iterated on that. We passed the project back and forth a bunch of times. People put in their ideas, and they were all great ideas. And I would say my two biggest contributions to that collab would have to be the mini breakcore section in the end of the first half. There's like a small piano interlude because I knew that Osumania people go apeshit for solo piano pieces.
That's my favorite bit, coincidentally.
Yeah, that is a pretty funny joke, actually.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. So it's like, well, yeah, you know, I was one of those players, right? So like, fine.
Yeah.
And then the ending, everyone contributed to the ending, to be fair, but like,
yeah,
the initial draft where it was like that fast, that was like one of the first ideas I had, like when I was even approached by the commissioners. So that ended up being like a really successful project, I think.
Yeah,
and
it's kind of cool that it seems like because you had some deep, extensive experience with this community, that you were like, you could take the lead on this project and basically say like, here's specifically I think what they're gonna want, and then go like see if you can work something like this in.
Yeah.
And did you? I think if you're allowed to tell us, what exactly was like, what was the time frame for this project? Like,
ooh,
like was it like a month?
No, it was 3 months. I think it was 3 months.
Oh, okay, that's not that bad. That is pretty tight.
No.
But
yeah, it's really tight though, right? Because like
for a 7-minute,
if you're a solo person working on a 7-minute song, you're not gonna finish that track in less than a month unless you're insane. While you're working full time, right?
Right.
And so every time every person you add onto a collab, you can expect to add basically another month of downtime to the working time for that project.
Because of the communication between people checking their stuff. Yeah.
Because of communication, because well, there's two factors that make collabs much longer than solo works. I think number one is that when you're passing the project back and forth, the other person needs to learn what you did, right?
Yeah.
They need to figure out, okay, what are these synths actually doing? And if there's project loading problems, there's that too. And then there's also just like schedules not lining up.
Yeah.
Which was like a big issue for Purple Palace. But we got around it. Yeah.
Yeah. Which that's very surprising because it's like I would have expected for like 3 months. It's kind of like, you could kind of make it work, but would you say you probably needed like maybe 5 months?
That would have made it easier, but you know, it ended up working out in the end. So
yeah.
You know, it's fine.
Fair enough. And with that, oh wait, sorry, Rennie, go on.
That reminds me, was there like any interaction between the mappers of the actual track? Because I'm not sure who mapped it, but
there's a few people that mapped. It was like someone named Minty and then Davy and then some other people who like I had long stopped playing Osumania at this point, right? But I checked out some of their maps because you know I still like the game. And they were really good at mapping, so I was like, all right, we can trust these guys, right?
They're the upper echelon.
It was actually pretty. So that part of it was pretty professional. Like a lot of parts of the process felt like they were doing it for the first time, which they were doing it for the first time. But at least they had for both TWC and MWC and all the other tournament commissions after that. Everyone had the insight to say, okay, there should be one person from the Osu side in charge of communication with the artists.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And sometimes they would invite the mappers in to the chat room or whatever, but mostly it was that one person. And they also had the insight to say, okay, sometimes Osu community members can be very opinionated and not very elegant, I will say, in how they express their opinion.
Yeah.
And so having like a layer of, I guess tact in between did end up being quite good for some things.
That's very nice.
Yeah.
But because generally my experience with the Osu community has never really been, at least for me specifically, never really was super positive. Just because of the stuff that I had heard, and then also like some other people that I had seen interact. Yeah. I have only seen like, at least I've seen the beautiful parts of Osu, but I've also seen a lot of the ugly parts of Osu.
Yeah.
And it's
it's what it is, right?
Yep. And that rounds us all the way back out to like, you got to basically make a final song for something that you essentially like grew up with, and with 2 artists that were like really prominent in the scene. So it kind of all rounds out the story a little bit.
Yeah, that was just crazy. Like I don't think that'll happen again.
That is a pretty wild combination of artists, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I think with that, it's an hour and 48 minutes. Wow. I mean, for the original, probably cut. Yeah, holy shit. We could talk about this. Yeah. Wow. With that, I mean, I think we're basically out of time. But Bill, thank you so much for coming on. This actually was so interesting, much more interesting than I think either of us could have expected. Rini, I drowned you out most of the time. I'm so sorry, man.
No, that's okay. I like listening, and it was actually it was a fun time listening.
Yeah,
and asking occasionally.
Bill, I guess before we all part ways and end this recording, do you have any shout outs, any links you want to send people to? Where can people find you, etc.?
Oof. You can find me on Twitter and SoundCloud. I guess Enemy has those links.
We'll put them in like in the description or something like that.
Yeah, that works. I don't really have anything to promote right now, except to say I have some solo works coming out soon, hopefully. Yeah. They're going to be cool. I hope you enjoy them. And thanks so much for having me. It's been really fun talking to you.
Yeah, I really this went like way more successful than I thought. And so with that, we'll see you all guys next month with whoever the next guest artist is, and we'll have our newsletter sometime this month. So thanks for coming, guys. I'm Enemy. That's Rini, unless I name. Yeah. And we'll see you guys next month. Bye.
Bye.